family. It's Davon Love, Director of Public Policy at Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And joining us today, we have Dr. Cleo Manago. For the audience, can you please just introduce yourself, tell folks just some relevant information about the work you've done?
Okay. Well, you said my name. Got that over with. My background is behavioral health and cultural anthropology. I've been an activist for about 50 years. Predominantly focused on Black problem solving, critical thinking, culture affirmation, self-conceptual health, and teaching us to unlearn generational white supremacist anti-Black behaviors. I'm also the chief advisor for the Black Men's and Women's Xchange based here in Baltimore and the CEO of the Pride Center of Maryland.
So one of the things you mentioned, in kind of the very beginning part of your introduction, you talked about, just some of the ways that, our minds are impacted by the larger system of white supremacy, colonialism. And, for a lot of people, this notion may be abstract, right? This notion of like colonization, how white supremacy impacts people's minds, people's behavior. So can you talk about the way in which white supremacy, colonialism, the way that it does impact people's consciousness, how it impacts people's behavior in ways that are concrete for people that, again, some people just might think it's abstract and don't know how it connects to their actual behavior?
All right. Well, I tell the story often because it's one of the most powerful ones I remember experiencing, and I try to make it short. I was invited to a mental health conference to speak in St. Paul. I forgot when it was now, but it was right after Dylann Roof did his murder. Shot 12 people, 9 people died. And I asked the people in the audience, predominantly Black, like 90% Black, and there was maybe 1,000 people there, and many of them had brought their children. During my talk, and this was about 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the talk, I asked the audience, could I ask their children a question? And I said, if you think the question is inappropriate or problematic, stop me in my tracks and I won't continue. And at that time, because I've been speaking a while, they've kind of liked me a little bit, I think. At least somebody did. But anyway, they said yes. I said, to you young people, do you know who Dylann Roof is? And parents were clearly shocked by the question, but they didn't want to interrupt because on the surface it didn't seem that bad, though Dylann Roof was kind of a controversial topic. I said, do you know who Dylann Roof is? And the majority of the children who were like maybe 7+ knew who Dylann Roof was. I said, did your parents talk to you about Dylann Roof? Have you been invited to a discussion to say how you felt about what happened? And nobody said yes. And these were Black mental health professionals. So I asked the mental health professionals, the parents that were there, I said, did any of you take your child to the side and ask them how they felt about the Dylann Roof incident? And one guy way in the back kind of up and down his hand. He wasn't sure about what he did, apparently. And I asked the children, I said, well, how do you feel about that? And some of the boys in particular started weeping. And I said to the audience, I said, your parents care about you, they love you, and you'll be fine. But I wanted the parents to understand that our children live in the presence of all types of traumas that we call ourselves protecting them from by not talking about it. And when we can afford it, giving them goodies or teaching them to go to school and get an education, but we're not paying attention to what they're dealing with as Black children, because there is no white Dylann Roof where there's white shooters that have done all kinds of things, but they didn't go into the church and do a racially focused shooting. That only happens to Black people. And these kids know this. And they also saw police brutality. They know about Michael Brown, Sandra Bland. They know about all this kind of stuff. And we don't talk to them about it. And I talk about how sometimes I'm a counselor for people, including some very famous people. And a very famous Black woman called me, and this has happened before, but it happened again recently, because on the playground of her 5-year-old child, one of the kids called them that N-word. And make a long story shorter, she said, Cleo, I don't know what to do. and this is a brilliant woman. She's not intellectually she's really, really smart. And I said to her in the nicest voice I can come up with, as smart as you are, how come you don't know what to do with your child coming home crying and devastated about being called that word on the campus? Why don't you know what to do? Well, that's why I called you. I said, and I'm doing my job by asking you to think and deconstruct yourself. Why can't you tell your baby, with the brains you got, what to do about this incident? And she said something that I heard a billion times. Well, I don't want my child angry. And I stayed very calm, as I tend to do as part of my strategy. I said, angry at who? I said, when you are mad at her father who divorced you, they get to hear about that N-word and this black blah, 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 and how that MF black blah, they get to hear that on the phone or whoever your girlfriend is while you complain about him, but you don't want to offend who? And to make a long story short again, she didn't want to offend white people.
Right.
So we spent a whole lot of time sacrificing ourselves, disassociating ourselves from common sense and self-preservational behavior on behalf of black individuals and the collective to keep a often not in the room, but they're in here, white person protected. And I got all kinds of stories because of who I am as a black affirming person of black people who said, because I said something about it's important that black people love themselves in their own image and that they are not white accommodations, and they'll say to me, you must hate white people. Do you hate white people? And I'll say to them, because I'm into critical thinking, have you ever asked anybody, do they hate black people? Have you got so passionate, concerned that you said, do you hate black people? Have you ever asked that question? And in almost every case, they go into a catatonic state of disorientation when they first hear the question because it doesn't fit into the white supremacy mindset or the white supremacy trance to even consider questioning whether black people are in danger or in harm. We don't question that. But if white people, Goldilocks and white Jesus or the equivalent is in any kind of harm, oh my God. Well, those are examples of everyday, normal, anti-black, white supremacist behaviors that are inside of the black culture. One more thing, because it happened just yesterday. I was walking outside of my office and I saw this sister. She must have been, 30, maybe like 20s, with this cute little girl who must have been maybe 3 years old. And the cute little girl had her mother's hand and she was walking the street. Her mother was on the phone talking much smack, N-word this and blah, 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 that. And the little girl is subject to this as a normal part of her culture, anti-black implications, and no doubt white affirming or white adoring implications. And she's just a baby sitting there with no thought. One of the things that I've done about that in my work is created what we call intentional black parenting. I might talk about that later, but we teach black parents that you're not raising a child, you're raising a black adult. That's the end game. And you got to prepare them to be robust and proud and self-conceptually healthy in this society. And you can't do that by MFing and N-wording in their presence or even toward them. That's some stories about that too, that you've seen too, where they were the subject of it. And I've been to Africa many times. And there's exceptions to everything. So I'm not gonna say this is a general statement, right. But names, for example, mean something. In most African names, because they're thousands of years old, unlike Aisha and Dante, these are new names that are poetic to somebody's ears, but if you ask them what it means, you won't get a good explanation. But almost everybody I know from Africa, their name means the sun or the gods or the river runs or something. And there's a great adoration for newborns and for elders. The newborns just got here, the assumption that they used to be an elder and they coming back and the elders on their way. And there's all this respect that's going down. So what children hear is important. Metaphors, language, concepts is important. So the child, and a lot of the mothers and the fathers, but some mothers literally keep the child on their back, as the babies. So they're very thoughtful about what that child experiences. and you will almost never see an African child in the store having a fit. And I looked for it. I went from Kumasi to Accra, to all over the Africa. Where are the children who act like brats and who have a fit when they can't get what they want? Where they at? I didn't see them. Now I'm sure they're somewhere, but I was looking for miles and miles and miles, and I didn't see them. Well, we went from being African to becoming objectifying American capitalist consumers, and very concerned about how we look in youth culture and blah, 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 and no longer looking at our lives as sacred. Those are some of the impacts of colonialism.
One of the terms I've heard you use is Black people being in a collective trauma trance. And one of the things we've talked a lot about, on this program is and you've heard me discuss some of the ways in which the collective consciousness around Black people tends to emphasize pathology, right, and notions of inherent inferiority. And so again, I've heard you talk about this notion of Black people in this trauma trance. Can you say a little bit about what that is and how that manifests itself?
Okay. I'll talk about it logically first. When you're a human being called Black in a society that perpetually implies that something is wrong with you, or that you have lesser value than others, particularly whites, but everybody else, and you're not given a critical analysis to look at that as a corruption as opposed to a benevolent source raining on your psyche, you can't help but to go into some level of schizophrenia, because just being in your body becomes problematic. There was a very famous book and movie back in the day. You're too young to know what this, but about Sybil. You ever heard of the movie Sybil? Okay, it was a movie called Sybil that starred Sally Field. And it was a movie based on a true story about this child who was sexually abused all the time by their father. And what they did, because being in their body was so painful, was they disassociated. Excuse me, they disassociated and went into a trance and became other people. That's what happened to Black people. We are going into many generations of being uncomfortable in our bodies with very few real meaningful interventions. Often we go to white Jesus as an intervention for sanctuary, and we go right into profoundly anti-Black context, including movies and other things, for some sanctuary or relief, and it's all recreating the anti-Black implications. There's a scene that I've made people very aware of in a documentary called A Girl Like Me, where among the interviews, which were with Black children who choose a white or the Black doll, one of the Black children, a little girl, is asked, which doll is good and which doll is bad? And she says the Black doll was bad and the white doll was good. And then she's asked, after a few more deliberations, which one is you? And she goes into the trance and out of the trance, because there's a witness and there's logic that comes from the witness being in the room. So she can't just default into the trance and go to the white doll. But she tries. She reaches for that white doll like and then she picks up the Black one, and she's horrified. When she picks it up, you can see her face. She's like, oh my God, I'm the Black doll. Well, that's the trance.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with Black children. He asked them to choose between a Black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with?
This one. I like that one.
Show me. I can.
This one.
That one?
This one. I like to play with this.
And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
He's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And can you and why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And why do you think that's a nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you? "15 out of the 21 children preferred the white doll."
Our ancestors came to this country and they were pretty much ripped out of their culture. You know, they couldn't speak their language. They couldn't, they couldn't be themselves. They had to be like what everybody else told them to be. When you don't know where you're from and you don't know what country you're from, all you know is basically you're from Africa, that's all you're given, I feel like it brings on like a lot of ignorance and it builds a lot of anger. I've seen it build a lot of anger in a lot of black young females. Like, I don't know, they feel like because they feel like they have a right to disown any kind of, African roots.
I think for a black girl in general, it's like you're missing a piece of you, And for me, yeah, it's like, I don't have any actual heritage, not heritage, but culture. Like, I know I'm from Africa, but the different countries in Africa have their different cultures, their different morals, their different values, and not knowing that it sort of keeps us at a loss, and I feel like we're busy searching for it while everybody else in society is throwing their ideas and what they believe we should be at us. But personally, we know that's not what we should be, but we're gonna take it because we don't know exactly what it is that we should be, because we don't really know where we came from.
When you are second guessing your value, particularly, don't get me started, particularly compared to white people. I mean, don't get me sounding catty about anything, but I mean, the whole notion of white supremacy is so profoundly ridiculous and mythological and insane and corrupt and crazy and twisted that people who are African and who are of who we are and where we are from and who we are a part of being inferior to anybody, let alone white people, is insane. So how could you not be in a trance when you are in a society that implies that the insane is sane and that the sane is problematic? You understand what I'm saying? So those are examples of the trance. And even when a black parent does not feel the logical move of affirming their child, loving their child, reinforcing their child, and teaching them that that's wrong, not you, that's a natural reaction, but that's not what a lot of black parents do when their parents or their children experience something like racism. They, like, for instance, you might have seen recently there was a child that was at a Legoland. It's an amusement park. I had never heard of it, but it's like Disneyland, Legoland, and it was on the show called Roland Martin Unfiltered, where the little girl and the little boy, black, were sitting there waiting for the Lego characters to play, the like Mickey Mouse equivalents to play with them, and they totally ignored them. And all the parents told them was, well, not everybody's going to like you. That's not a affirming, transformative, supportive thing to tell a child who's been treated like that. They need their self-concept resurrected. Well, that we think twice about teaching them to love themselves in the presence of a white assault is part of the trance.
So what are some of the ways, and I guess that you kind of just gave one example, what are some examples of the way that popular culture and representations in popular culture perpetuate, that?
Well, there's something that comes to mind that I hope answers your question, because it's been killing me. There's this new voting commercial.
Oh, man.
Yeah. They use the word "vucking" or something. Yeah. And I asked some people, I said, do you think white folks would hire Ozzy Osbourne Or what's that dude who played in the film with Jackie something, Chan? You think Asians would hire Jackie Chan to be their political spokesperson for something that's significantly political? No. We haven't seen it because you're not gonna see it. Right. But we talking about Cardi B and what are those people's names? These entertainers who are not even particularly brilliant or transformative or helpful to the Black consciousness, who they're choosing to be our spokespersons or symbolic to our conversations on what we should do politically in this country. That's an example.
Yeah. That's funny too, because we were in the office, we saw it this week, and we're just like I want to meet the person who decided to who watched that and decided to vote because of that video.
Well, but see, in my opinion, you're gonna get me in trouble. It's not even about the voting. That's just if they vote for white folks or whoever the Democrats and Republicans are going to choose, that's a fringe benefit. What it does is it keeps us trivial. Mm-hmm. It keeps us ungrounded. It keeps us unserious. It keeps us anti-Black. That's in my opinion, that's part of the goal. The fringe benefit is other kind of stuff because we are not disentranced enough to go, what the? Are you serious? We're not even awake enough to be offended, because we should be like, wait a minute. We should have been offended back when Biden chose Kamala Harris, or somebody who still has not done anything that's relevant to Black people, and started off at Howard because the seduction was coming. And it got hot. I told her, this is a true story. I told a friend of mine. I said, she's going to take a picture with some hot sauce. Watch. And she did. She took a picture with some hot sauce so we could see it. And look how we're seen. You know what I'm saying? Somebody said the other day about, I wonder how white people feel about, I said, no, you need to worry about how Black children feel about this stuff. Damn white people and what they feel. You need to worry about what do Black people feel about this buffoonery and this making caricatures out of Black humanity, not what white people think. It's based on what they think that we're dealing with all this. So we need to deflect on that and look at how we see each other, because there are casualties of this, which we may or may not get into, the body count, including at each other's hands, because that's what people who are trivialized will do. You ain't nothing, I ain't nothing, bam.
That's right.
And there's other communities who have less of a phenomena like that occurring because they're not doing that. They're not thinking you're not nothing. I mean, you ever heard the term "act your age, not your color"?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of person said it?
Black
person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not genetic. Let's make that clear. That kind of behavior is not genetic. It's the trauma trance is generational, and we're in a state of, our common sense is still there, but it's dormant, and it's fighting through trauma, unanswered questions, and silence when it comes to the possibility of getting answers. I mean, when somebody asks, I'm grown, that's why. You heard that before, because I said so. The child is trying to be a critical thinker and trying to find out what's going on. And sometimes the parents don't know, like that sister I told you about, that rich, famous, brilliant sister, she didn't know. But it wasn't that she didn't know. She was traumatized unconsciously by the idea of her child being angry about racism. And she figured she buy her cute clothes, she gonna go to college, she gonna have a good weave, all this stuff is gonna happen, and she gonna be all right. No, she needs to learn to love herself, or she gonna become a well-weaved, college-going, highly paid, white supremacist slave.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is I feel like, a lot of people have trouble really understanding the way that the psychological denigration impacts us because it's so ubiquitous. And one of the things I feel like you do a great job of is really giving specific examples of the way in which these things manifest themselves. And one of the things I've seen you talk about before, and you mentioned it here, is the extent to which Black folks collectively don't practice valuing ourselves. And I don't know that that thought on the surface is controversial, but I think it's the extent to which we don't value ourselves that I think for a lot of people is jarring. You know what I mean? Because of how normalized it is. And, you know, for me, when I think about the way that this society is structured, it's structured like a plantation, right? Yes. Those that control access to resources control how people eat. And so people adopt the kind of cultural mores of the dominant society and adopt it in ways that normalize it. And I think for me, a part of the challenge is really like making it so that people are clear that plantation is not a normal way of human life. You know, and that conditioning people to navigate the plantation is survival, you know, and I think people have a hard time with that. Like I said, you mentioned it, but in terms of the idea of the extent to which we don't value ourselves, how would you describe to someone who may say, okay, I get it, you know, Black people, we need better self-esteem, we need better confidence. Like, how would you really impress upon them the extent to which the work to value ourselves is so critical to moving forward?
There was a film made that starred, what's his name? Sorry, name is gone. He passed. He had cataracts, and he was. His name may come back to me, but in the film, he talks about going to the Schomburg and meeting with the Black Puerto Rican who began the Schomburg in New York, and he asks him something along the lines of, "Why do Black people go through what we go through?" And I'm paraphrasing, and it might not even be paraphrasing well, but the bottom line was, he says, you need to understand the people that created the context that we're in.
Mm-hmm. John Henry Clark.
That's who it was, Dr. John Henry Clark. Mm-hmm. Long and mighty walk.
The
great and mighty walk. Yes.
That's right.
And thank you. I like to have clarity. And what I do, and I'm glad I get to talk about this stuff, and I feel very blessed to use a Christian term, which is problematic, so I'm paraphrasing. I'm fortunate, thank you, I changed it. I feel very fortunate that I can talk to you about what I do about that, because it's a practice and I've seen the results, so it's not just theory. When I work with people, depending on the situation, Black people in this instance, which is typically the case, I just get them to take a look at things around them. And to make a real complex story shorter, I ask them to look at why they think that we're both N-words and why they have bad implications in their mind about who Black people are. Why? And in most cases, they have never even thought about it. You know, grandmama did it, daddy did it, my cousin, my brother. It's acculturated, it's embedded, it's a norm. Sit your Black ass down. Shut your Black, and you ain't just an MF, you a Black MF, which is the emphasis before MF. Right. You know, so these are things that are intergenerational, normal, like that little girl who was she's just a baby, and her mother's. So what I do is I do trance breaking, triggering, to get them to actually evaluate their meaning making, the genesis of how they came to be, why they have their worldview. And in many instances, they didn't even know they had a worldview. They didn't even know they had a genesis. They just try to have some lunch. Whatever it is they're trying to do. And I'll ask them to do some investigation around different elements in their lives, their parents, the media, whatever it is. And what happens is that people start becoming thoughtful about who they are and how they came to be. And then I ask some questions like, and I'm abbreviating this, and I'm not even being necessarily chronological. Why is white better? I'll ask them, why is white better? And I do what I ask these questions with the least amount of any reaction from my parents and my affect, because I'm already Black and a male, and that's already problematic in some people's psyche. So why is white better? And what we find out through the process is that it's not better. It may be more, what's the word I usually use? It may be more deceptive and more capable of deception. For example, there's a movie out that I have not seen and probably will never see it unless it's on my TV for free and I just have some extra popcorn, called The Woman King. And I was concerned. Maybe you saw it and you can correct me, but I was concerned about that film because, and I'm still answering your question, believe it or not, because white people choose what they'll green light and what they won't green light. They won't green light a Queen Nzinga film because she won. They won't green light a Toussaint Overture and Dessalines film because they won, like a bad boy. I mean, they won. There's the brother who was part of the Lethal Weapon franchise, along with Danny Glover, has tried to get a Hollywood version of Toussaint done, and he has had problems. But the other dude, the white boy Mel Gibson, was able to make a film about a British or Scottish freedom fighter. And usually when you have that kind of gravity, they both were part of the franchise, both get the gravity to do what they want to do. But they would not let him make that film. So how that's relevant is that when you put together the reality that's happening with this in a way that people can actually grasp it, they're willing to think about it. We're not stuck in a trance. Like I said, the reality, the desire for clarity is desperately under the dormant. We want it. So one thing I don't do, and I have to answer that as part of the question, is I don't traumatize them. I don't shame them. I don't judge in an apparent way black people for what we do, because what we do is the symptom of cause and effect. Like, for example, when we were being lynched every 5 minutes because a white man had a bad day or a white woman had a bad day, we were terrorized because we're human beings, we're black men. We're human beings. So we were terrified and we were scared. And if you've ever seen, which I'm sure you have, what a lynching looks like, it's one of the most horrendous, horrific things and there's sounds. We don't get to hear the sounds in a picture, but there were sounds and screaming and horror. It was Ida B. Wells. It took a sister to step out and slow down, not stop, but slow, because we were too terrified. So all that to say is that I break the trance through exercises and activities and strategies. And once that trance, and it doesn't take that much time either. As a matter of fact, it happens shorter than my explanation. But we break down how people come to be and what and get them to explain the inferiority complex and the superiority complex of white people. And they realize this don't make no damn. Yeah, you're right. It don't make no sense. So are you willing to stop? And then I support them on how to stay out of the trance. And all that was still relatively uncomplex compared to the real application. But what I was going to say about the Woman King, which I forgot to mention, was that they wouldn't make a film about Nzinga, and they wouldn't make a film about Toussaint, but they made a film about this king and the homies, so white people can get off the hook again about slavery. Because the implication in that movie, from what I heard, is that black people simply enslaved other black people. But what's missing from that film, just like the film Rwanda, Hotel Rwanda, did you see that? Is that they did not include, because white people made the film, that white people are, first of all, in Hotel Rwanda, white people created the whole thing. They created the whole conflict and left machetes like they left guns in South Central Los Angeles on the train tracks after they created all this crack and all of this mayhem. But before the white people started taking advantage of the servitude system, they were already there doing trade. You understand what I'm saying? They're already there preparing to deceive. And that's one thing they do better than us, is deceive. But is that really a sign of superiority? I mean, if you in the forest, a bear gonna get your ass. Does that mean that the bear is superior to you? No, they just got you that day. You understand what I'm saying? And we keep thinking that they're superior, but when you break it down, having profound deception skills is not necessarily a sign of superiority, it's a sign of sinister.